Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another whiskey review. And today we are getting into a special release. New Riff 10-year 100% malted rye whiskey coming in at 118.8 proof. What's really cool is New Riff is starting to do these distillery-only drops in these 375s. All the drops thus far have been double-digit age statements as well, as they show you their other mash bills and what they can do at these high age statements. If you've been following the channel, you know that we love the 10-year New Riff Rye and the 10-year New Riff Bourbon that came out last year. But in 2026, with all of these 6-year single barrels coming out, it does seem to be the year of the malted rye for New Riff. So does this mash bill taste better as it gets up there in age? Stick around to find out. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right, well, let's pour this one out here, but we are going to review the 10-year on the fly here. And then I also have a few other malted rye releases from New Riff that I would like to compare this to in order to understand the profile more and more. I've got just a little bit left of an 8-year, also 118 proof malted rye, and I've now gotten my hands on two different 6-year single barrels. The one from Whiskey Weather and Bourbon Jerks, the other a distillery-only release that I bought the same day as the 10-year malted rye. Now, for the 10-year malted rye that we are just about to review, it did cost $49.99 for a 375, which is a pretty darn fair price. New Riff is really, really good on their prices. The other thing that I'm learning about the malted rye mash bill is that they are aging in different char levels and different barrels. Just as an example, on the Whiskey Weather Bourbon Jerk pick, that one is a independent stave company char 4, whereas the distillery only 6-year is a Kelvin char 4. But apparently others come in even lower char levels, some even in char 1, which explains so much about the different colors I have seen on this release and the different flavor profiles that I'm hearing from those that are doing single barrel selection. Now, on this 10-year here, I'm guessing this was a 2-barrel blend. And though I realize the quantities of this one are lower, what this serves more as is a preview as New Riff steps up in these age statements across their other mash bills. I missed out on the 10-year wheated bourbon release that they did at the distillery, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on these distillery-only releases because I bet you they're all going to be bangers. So let's get in the nose, then we'll explore the palate, then do some very quick comparisons to those single barrels and the 8-year to get to fully understand this profile a bit more and whether it is something that you should have on your radar. So cheers, everybody. Let's get into this. The nose on this one is kind of cracking me up a little bit, because it's going to bring me distinctly back to a Matt Porter memory when he was doing the World's Best Whiskey Taster Challenge. But I am getting a Monte Cristo sandwich on this thing. Essentially, I'm almost describing this as rye bread made into a French toast, covered in powdered sugar, with a dried cherry and blood orange marmalade being the jam inside the sandwich. I mean, not quite getting the ham, but also not getting the ham. And I could even get a little bit of like the maple syrup getting in there. The oak profile on this is really nice, though it doesn't come across explicitly as 10 years. But man, it is quite savory and quite good. My tasting notes actually surprised me on this one, or I should say my nosing notes. So let's get into the tasting notes here next, but I'm pretty excited. Cheers, everybody. And man, even before we get into this, I always like showing how oily something is. I mean, this is something that has been more and more prevalent, I feel like, in whiskey releases over the last 2 years. I just feel like I am finding that distilleries are leaning into making sure that these releases do have that nice, oily coating mouthfeel. And you can just see what it does to these glasses. So let's get into the taste itself. Cheers, everybody. This one has interesting movements on the palate. Up front, the fruits do really stick out. The cherry and that blood orange and all of that sweetness. The oak is only hinted at. It's really in the background up front. And the rye spice really begins trying to punch its way through. The transition to mid-palate, it begins to darken up, show its age, The char notes really do take forward, and I continue to get this vibe of that French toast rye bread. And it is covered in maple syrup, so it does match the nose quite a bit. And then as you get into this nice long finish, it gets darker even further, really showing its oak profile. And the fruits at that point are almost gone completely. And the sweetness is almost gone completely. It's more savory and dark and oak forward on the finish, with that rye spice really battling through. It definitely takes a more interesting journey than I was expecting as you really sit down and dissect it. Man, quite a good pour though. And man, this nose has even opened up further as it's been sitting in this glass. I wish all the characteristics on the nose and how the fruit and the savoriness and the oak all come together on the nose. There's never a point on the palate though where I feel like they all come together. Let's do one more sip and see if I can get all those parts to come together like I'm hoping. Yeah, I got a bit more of the sweetness there, but that oak by the end really does take over. I feel like this one with the oak profile actually comes across oakier than the 10-year bourbon or that 10-year rye. So here on the channel, we do have a robust scoring system comprised of a flavor score, experience score, and a value score. Aggregate all those points together, and you can figure out how this whiskey compares to other whiskeys and whether it is a buy, a try before you buy, a buy and back up, however you want to describe it. And on this one, maybe a little lower than I expected. At an 87, I graded both the rye and the bourbon a 90 out of 100. So this smaller release is below where I put the rye and the bourbon, but man, it is very enjoyable. I'd be excited about the layers that they can find with a blend with more barrels into it. But if they can find a way to retain that fruit profile and the oak profile they got here consistently throughout the experience, it would definitely score a few points higher and has a whole lot of potential. So before we conclude today's video, I did want to do a quick read of the other whiskeys that I have here. Randomly pulled out a bourbon jerk glass, and I know which one I'm going to use that on. But we did have an 8-year high note come out 2 years ago for the malted rye. I absolutely adored this upon release, though I am curious to see how it's going to do by comparison. I almost got to a bottle kill on this one. I'll enjoy the rest of that one later. And then I've got 2 single barrels. This one was distillery release. This one is in a Kelvin Char 4. And then the other single barrel was from Whiskey Weather and the Bourbon Jerks, which I'll put in the Bourbon Jerk glass here. And while the 10-year and the high notes are more limited, these 6-year malted rye are going to be hitting the scene all over the place in 2026. I mean, right off the bat, what sticks out to me is pretty consistent colors, though the 6-year Whiskey Weather Bourbon Jerk pick is actually probably the darkest one. I'm going to do a quick read on the nose, work my way through the single barrels, and try to understand a bit more the flavor range behind this particular mash bill, especially across the different ages. On the nose of the 8-year, there's definitely a lot of that cherry, comes across less spicy, less oaky than the 10-year, and less savory, more sweet, even getting into something that's more white cake, even angel food cake, versus that more distinct French toast rye bread. Though the maple is in here as well. Let's go in for a taste. On the taste, definitely has more consistent fruits throughout the palate, though I do find myself missing that incredible oak on the 10-year by comparison. I wouldn't be surprised now that I know more about this mash bill with those different char levels, if this one even has some char 1 in the blend. All in all though, much brighter and more fruit consistent throughout. Does have very similar beats though. 10-year though is my preference on that comparison. All right, now we got the 2 single barrels here. And once again, these will be the ones that people will more than likely be able to get their hands on. I think price on these is like $59.99 or $69.99. And keep an eye out on Sealbox, Shared Pour, local stores. I mean, New Riff is doing a huge push on this malted rye mash bill in 2026. Wow, these noses are actually totally different paths. The Whiskey Weather Bourbon Jerk single barrel has a whole lot more baking spice, whereas the distillery-only crew pick is more fruit forward and light by comparison, at least on the nose. Let's see if there's any differences in the tastes. The distillery pick is definitely a crowd pleaser, more refreshing in nature with its fruit profile, getting more into a more distinctly refreshing citrus range than any of the other pours thus far. It's interesting, Dustin over there from Top Shelf Whiskey went to the distillery and grabbed both of these with me. Mentioned in a text message, keys on this distillery only release, and I kind of get it in this moment. It's very strange, almost the rind of like a brie even with that powder on it. Brie would be the cheese that I'd settle on, Dustin. You put that dang thought in my head. Man, the bourbon jerk whiskey weather one's definitely more interesting on the nose. Even in this particular lineup, even got more of a barbecue spice to it. Here in Cincinnati, it almost reminds me of like the Grippo's barbecue rub. Still got the darker fruits on there, but the fruits are much darker. Darker than any of the 4 that I've had here. Darker than any of the 3 that I've had here. On the palate, definitely a lot of dark cherry going on. So in the comparison of these 4 pours, I do think I like the 10-year the best, though I think I actually graded the Whiskey Weather Bourbon Jerk the exact same score as the 10-year for different reasons. I actually think I prefer some of the depth and the flavor in that 6-year better than the 10-year. The 10-year I dinged a little bit for its lack of consistency. But the flavor profile range seems to be between something that's going to be a light citrus to a blood orange to a cherry. The level of char or oak influence you get is going to be dependent on the char level, the barrel, and the age. And then there's definitely a distinct difference in the different spice profiles. The 10-year had a very explicit rye spice profile, whereas some of these others drifted more into just baking spices or were gentle and really didn't have that spice range at all. But definitely fun to explore these different levers as we get to know these 6-year single barrels more and more throughout the year. And I'm sure new Riff will be releasing more higher aged as it goes on too, maybe even as a 10-year high note. One can only hope. So one last thing to do is to blend these all together. So we're blending 2 6-years, an 8-year with a little bit of the 10-year there. And it'll be interesting to see what emerges from these different flavor profiles. So cheers, everybody. Let's get into the blend. Nose is pretty great on the blend, even introducing something closer to a berry profile than the cherry I was talking about earlier. Back to the powdered sugar, the marmalade, more of that Monte Cristo sensation. Did I say Crisco or Cristo? Now I'm even doubting myself which one's the sandwich. Let's go in for a taste. Ooh, that blend turned out pretty good. Really gets that consistent fruit throughout. The oak from the 10-year is sticking out as well. Really did combine all the best aspects of these. Again, makes me excited for the day they do another high note with a blend of a lot of barrels. Different chars, different profiles, different barrel manufacturers. Yep. That blend's got a strong, strong profile. So keep an eye out for more releases of the new Riff Malted Rye. Curious if you've gotten a chance to try these cast strength releases that are now coming out. And should Hello Again Whiskey Friends being pursuing one of these? I've been a little reluctant to do a new Riff pick, but everyone keeps wondering why we're not. Maybe I should reach out. Let me know what you think in the comments. And just remember, while you can always find more whiskey, you can never have enough whiskey friends. So take care of those around you, and we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.